Hello, and welcome to the Focusing Way podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm your host, David Battistella. And today on the Focusing Way podcast, Emily Agnon. Emily is a certified focusing teacher and guide, a writer, and consultant. She works with highly sensitive introverts, using focusing to create the listening space they need to flourish. Emily is a highly sensitive introvert herself. Over the years, she has experimented with many ways to overcome the anxiety that often accompanies the trait, which for her first showed up in her school days and peaked during 5 years of professional oboe playing with the Honolulu Symphony. In extensive work with clients, she's found focusing is the most powerful tool to address the particular challenges sensitive introverts face. Emily says, "To us, focusing is like a Swiss Army knife sprinkled with catnip. It's not just pragmatic and elegant, it's irresistible. We sensitive introverts need meaning and depth the way plants need water and sunlight, and focusing takes us directly there. We also find there the authentic connection we crave." Emily's mission is to get focusing skills and awareness to as many sensitive introverts as she can. She lives with her partner in Rochester, New York, where a butterfly occasionally lands on her shoulder in the form of a text from her daughter at college. And joining me right now is Emily Agnon. Hello. It's nice to hear your voice again and to connect again in a focusing way.
Yours too. And I love that we can do this between Florence and Rochester, New York. It never ceases to amaze me.
It's one of the true beauties of technology and that global focusing community.
Yeah, this is really wonderful. And I'm very excited about this series that you're doing. So I look forward to hearing some of the other interviews too.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we could just jump right in, and I'll just begin by asking you how you came to focusing.
I first encountered focusing in 1987 when I got a hold of a copy of Gene Genlin's original little paperback book with the stones on the front. And I tried to teach it to myself. I was trying to get relief from, I was just very anxious. I was playing in the Honolulu Symphony at the time. And I tried to teach myself, but I got stuck. And back then, of course, we had no internet, and it was a lot more expensive talking on the phone. And he was in Chicago doing his work. So I put the book on the shelf, and it wasn't until 2010 that I was by then working with clients and really searching. Something was missing. And I attended an interrelationship focusing introductory workshop that just happened to be being given in the evening at another workshop I was at here. And I just fell in love with it immediately. I knew I had found, it felt like home to me. And 3 years later, in 2013, I was certified to teach focusing. I just dove right in. Feels like I've found my tribe in the focusing community.
That's so interesting. I have such a similar story with encountering that book and sort of bearing through it in a day, maybe rereading it again over the weekend. But just maybe describe that initial contact and just, what kinds of things attracted you to it?
That's a good question, and it's a long time ago. But what I remember about that time was how hungry I was to, I would say, to know myself better, to understand why I was reacting the way I was, to certain situations in my life, and I sensed that there was something about a process that starts out with it being okay to not know, and then trying in some subtle way to name what you don't know. There's a richness and a depth to that that just yeah, I knew that it was powerful. I just didn't know how to do it. Turns out it's not so easy, is it, to teach
Mm.
yourself? But can I say, I mean, since the most recent encounter, I do remember that very vividly in 2010. It was when I heard the words, you know, I'm sensing, I am sensing something in me. My whole world opened up. I had just not known how to come out of identification with upset places in me. You know, I just was living merged in them, and I didn't have any linguistic or conceptual way of even naming that. So that was just a huge day for me. It really was a life-changing day.
Hmm. And you've touched on something so lovely in the sense of Jean's book is obviously sort of the cornerstone of focusing. And then the next process you sort of were involved in is a sort of a specific kind of focusing that we both learned called inner relationship focusing, which is taught by Anne Weiser Cornell at Focusing Resources.
Mm.
And just her language skills and her and Barbara McGavin's ability to put a linguistic framework to use that as an entry point to self-discovery and to understand more about ourselves. It's certainly for me been quite a revelation.
Yes, like an entryway, and that's so true. I heard Anne say that because I know she struggled also to learn how to focus. And of course, that's what Jenlin had discovered, that some people just, it's not like he invented focusing. Some people naturally knew how to do that in therapy and where he was observing them, and he just distilled it. But she had, having struggled with it, created this new way of entering into the process. And for me, at the time, I was mostly doing a modality called inner bonding, which is a 6-step process where you go in and you dialogue internally, and then you kind of check with your inner knowing and take action. And me and my clients were getting so stuck in the process because we didn't have this linguistic, more subtle way of assisting, going in and making connection with something, often something very delicate or tender. There just was no help with that. So for me, I can't tell you the relief I experienced. I was able to practically overnight to start helping clients in a whole new way. Just even having that one realization about something in me. So a lot of gratitude to Anne and Barbara.
Yes, that the facilitative language that they've brought to focusing has certainly opened even more doors to something that was already is being widely practiced, but we're trying to make it less of a secret.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's certainly a dream of mine, because there's a lot of people who don't know about focusing. And in my opinion, well, certainly the group I work with, sensitive introverts, I just think it's as important, focusing is as important as exercising or eating well or getting enough sleep. It's really like oxygen to be able to go in and deeply hear and know yourself in the company of another. For me, anyway, being a sensitive introvert myself. So, yeah, so I agree, wanting to get it out there more.
I want to speak a little bit more about your work with sensitive introverts. But just before we go into that area, you mentioned that you were with the Honolulu Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of someone would maybe normally assume, oh, well, you're a musician. That's what you do for a living. You're already connected. You already, you pick up an instrument every day. So, somehow you're supposed to be sort of a yogi or something. Could you talk a little bit about that experience, your music background, and then, introducing focusing? How do those two things come together?
Well, I'm intrigued by your wondering whether playing an instrument that way would be like being a yogi. Do you mean in terms of like the kind of oneness that you can have where you kind of become one with the instrument? And
yeah, and I think I'm also talking about sort of a general assumption that I've experienced it as a creative, that many people think creatives sort of live the life of Riley, and it's a kind of a really easy life when the undertaking isn't always that simple. And I know even in my creative work, focusing has helped me enormously, and being able to bring that process not only to my work but to the people around me when I'm working.
yeah, so for you, so the focusing has really helped because that's, I would say, the same, and I, far from being easy. The oboe was actually quite a struggle for me. It was a physical struggle. It's not an easy instrument. You have to make reeds for it, and I, even through my professional playing years, it ironically wasn't until after I had played in the Honolulu Symphony for 5 years that I came back here and studied with a teacher here who's a great reed maker, and that part eased, so it was easier for me to have what I needed because an oboe player without a reed is a terrible thing. But so it was a struggle for me, but emotionally also, because there was this tremendous desire to put myself out there, right? To express what was in me. I wouldn't even say, yeah, it wasn't even so much about I wanted others to hear it, but it really was about getting it out of me. There was stuff in me that wanted to come out through the instrument. And I just had such a hard time with that. And I found out later, realized that it's because there was a wanting to express and a fear of expressing. And I didn't have the language or the understanding to be able to even see that until I worked in interrelationship focusing, to realize you can have both. You can both be wanting to express and have other parts of you that may be afraid of being, in my case, of being criticized, afraid of making a bad sound. So there was this kind of isometric thing going on. And it's a real tribute to the force of that creative energy in me and the joy that I experienced on the occasions when I was able to let stuff flow through me and just come out the other end, that I persevered for years and years and years. And the focusing now gives me a way to bring that clarity and that flow to all areas of life. I finally figured out how to do it on the oboe and then immediately started asking, well, how can I bring this flow to all areas of my life, not just the playing? So that's kind of my fascination now, is to bring it to all of life. I guess that's what you call living in a focusing way.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with focusing, and what I'm hoping to bring to people is that idea of just living in a focusing way and taking the time to pause and reflect in our day-to-day activities, in our interactions with other people, noticing the reactions we have in specific moments, maybe with the people around us, maybe with total strangers, and just kind of trying to really enrich the experience of living. One of the things I'm a little bit curious about is whether you've ever mulled the question of had you had focusing those 5 years in Honolulu, if that would have made it a different. I mean, I know it's hypothetical, and I don't mean to go there, but I find myself sort of wondering sometimes about but then some of the work I look back on, I can say, wow, I was really already a natural focuser in that sense with that film or with that experience. So any thoughts on that?
Oh, it would have changed my life. I was actively seeking help for this terrible anxiety, which the focusing I can if I get anxious now, I know exactly what to do. I can go within and sense, the different parts of me and what they're worrying about. But at the time, I wasn't able to get the help I needed. I remember going in through my health service to see a woman who turned out to be a behaviorally oriented therapist who told me every time I thought an anxiety producing thought just to put a rubber band on my wrist and snap it hard. I did not like that idea at all. I mean, that's the kind of help I was able to access. So I would say to have had focusing would have been quite life changing, definitely. And focusing partnership also is really wonderful because if you're a deep thinker like you are and like I am, it really helps to sit in the company of another person sometimes and have them help you hold the container for the depth of thoughts that are wanting to form. And so I love that aspect of it too, just being able to sit with another person in this really deep, creative way.
We've been listening to Emily Agnew of LuminousListening.com. Emily is a certified focusing professional who works with highly sensitive introverts. Be sure to listen to the rest of our conversation in the next episode, where we dive into the world of highly sensitive people and what it means to be highly sensitive. Did you know there's even a clinical definition for it? You've been listening to the Focusing Way podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm your host, David Battistella. Please take a moment to visit our website at thefocusingway.com.